The best handheld of 2024. Maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to play with it in 2024. It released pretty late in the year, and by the time it showed up at my door, everyone with review units was already playing it for literal months. There's actually two handhelds here, the Retroid Pocket 5, the one everyone's been talking about, and the Retroid Pocket Mini. The specs on these are almost identical, but one has a 16:9 OLED screen and one has a 4:3 AMOLED screen. Pre-orders for both of these went up at the beginning of September, and reviews started popping up for the Mini at the end of September. I didn't get my Mini until the last day of October. But since these devices are so similar, I wanted to wait until I got the Pocket 5 and do a review of both of them together. And I'm sure most of you are more interested in the Pocket 5 anyway. I didn't get my Pocket 5 until the middle of December. And then by the time I get to reviewing it, it's the holidays and there's a lot going on. And then you put up the tree and then the tree's too skinny and she wants to return it. So you gotta go to Target at 11 p.m. Then you gotta clear out your whole backseat, make room for the tree. So that's my excuse for only getting to it just now. Retroid products have me a bit conflicted because on paper, they're a great value. They have a lot of great specs and the price point beats everything else. Their products are usually the easiest for reviewers to recommend because they've been the cheapest way to get great quality GameCube and even Nintendo Switch emulation. But you get what you pay for. They've proven many times that they just fire these things out without testing them or even just looking at them at all. And their support is not the best. I'd like to say that they've gotten better, but I just don't know that for sure. Now, when you look at these things, I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is why would anybody want the Mini? Well, if you're only maxing out at GameCube and PlayStation 2 emulation, you're mostly doing retro stuff, 4x3 might actually be preferred here. Back in the GameCube PS2 era of gaming, I played almost entirely on a 4x3 flat CRT. Some games support 16:9. I think there's more on PS2 than there are on GameCube. But most of my gaming on these things is 4x3 anyway. So there's potential here for the Mini to be great. But I actually hate it and I don't understand why they made it. They both have relatively the same specs. They have the same CPU, GPU, the same 128 gigabytes of storage, the same Wi-Fi 6. The difference is the screen, of course, but also 2 gigabytes more RAM on the Pocket 5 and 100 more milliamp hour battery capacity. Although the smaller screen size might make up for the lower battery capacity on the Mini. The Mini also runs Android 10 for some reason, whereas the 5 runs Android 13. This is going to impact Nintendo Switch performance substantially, as Yuzu was never officially supported on Android 10. So don't get the Mini if you were planning on doing any Nintendo Switch emulation. And you shouldn't have been anyway, because it's got a 4x3 screen. Nintendo Switch games aren't gonna look great on there. They both feel pretty nice. They both have a bump on the back for grips, although the grips on the 5 are textured, which feels a bit better. I love the feel of the buttons and the D-pad. They both have very clicky buttons that feel like membrane buttons, but the D-pad feels like dome switches. The D-pads on these are extra clicky, which I really like. And I like that the D-pad is on the top for the most comfortable ergonomics when playing retro games. The sticks are nice and smooth. I like how they're kind of short and set in, which makes the whole device a bit more pocketable. They're not the most comfortable for more modern games, but it's fine how they are given the overall size of the consoles. The shoulder buttons are analog on both and have a good amount of travel, but not too much. I very much like how these feel, but I do like the 5 way more. The weight is spread out and it's a really thin console, making it feel a lot sleeker. Almost like a Switch Lite. Not only is the screen smaller on the Mini, but it's also a slightly lower resolution. 1280 by 960 is only a little bit shorter height-wise, but it's enough to make it feel like it's a lower resolution. Apparently, this resolution issue is a little deeper. It's not the resolution that they report on their website. It's actually supposedly 1280 by 928, and that's what leads to these weird shader issues and possibly that blurry text that I was seeing. So worse than I initially thought. The AMOLED screen is pretty nice, but the OLED screen is a bit nicer. You do get some nice contrast between the stark blacks and the bright whites like you do on a normal OLED. You know, I'm also pretty sure this is a native portrait OLED screen because it's a little jiggly when I scroll. It looks like it's updating the wrong way, which isn't a big deal. It's not like we're trying to get variable refresh rate out of this or anything. I don't want to take too many points off for this though, because getting an OLED screen in a budget console, especially one at this price point, is a feat in itself. And games still look great on here, so it's fine. One of my favorite things about Retroid devices is how easy they are to set up compared to other Android devices on the market. When you first turn on a Retroid, they give you the option to download certain recommended apps. This is such a great way for beginners to get into emulation. It shows them exactly what apps they'll need to start playing their retro games. I also have historically kind of liked Retroid's launcher. Some Android handhelds just kind of throw you into the Android OS and expect you to know how to load up a game yourself. Retroid's launcher at least gives you a way to lay out all of your retro games in front of you. Well, this launcher hasn't gotten an update in years. It was great back in the day when there was really nothing else, but now there's been so many different changes in all of these other third-party launchers and even launchers that come packaged in with other manufacturers' consoles. Retroid does include this old launcher on the Mini and the 5, but they also include a brand new launcher. It's exciting to finally get an updated launcher from them, considering how much I like the old one, except it doesn't work. I thought this was just a fluke, but it doesn't work on either device, not the Mini or the 5. And all I did was just open the app. It just sits on this loading screen. Sure, it could just be a fluke that just happened to me twice on two separate devices that shipped separately. It's the first thing I did when I opened the device. This is just the first issue that I'm having with my brand new Retroid. So after a lot of finagling, I just ended up with the good old standard Daiji Show on the Mini. I wish Daiji Show would auto set up ROMs for you, but unfortunately you need to scrape your ROMs library one system at a time. On the Pocket 5 though, I decided to use Emulation Station. This is the first time I've ever used the Android version of Emulation Station. I love the layout, and even though it's a paid app through their Patreon, I think it's worth the $5. It creates a folder structure for you, so you just have to place your ROMs inside those folders. I have Emulation Station set up on my PC handhelds, so I just stole the micro SD card from one of those and merged the folders. It was drag and drop easy. The front end populated with all my games on the first boot. It was as simple as that. Both devices perform pretty similarly despite the difference in RAM. Maybe that extra RAM just makes up for the different screen size and resolution. I did the 3D Mark benchmark tests, and on the Mini, we got 1337 on average, and on the 5, we got 1343 on average, which is pretty great. Only a slight performance boost over the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, which had a slightly worse SoC. However, the Ein Odin 2s and the Ion Neo Pocket DMG sort of blow the Retroids out of the water, which makes me think that these benchmarks don't really matter at all. Those other devices are hundreds of dollars more than the Retroids, and the performance difference is negligible. They kind of all emulate GameCube and PS2 games great, and they all emulate Nintendo Switch games to a reasonable degree. So take these Retroid benchmarks with a huge grain of salt. They're still immensely capable consoles, not just for the price point, but even against devices that are way outside of their price point. Anyway, the first thing that I did was GameCube emulation. Before you boot a GameCube game from whatever launcher you're planning on using, make sure you boot up Dolphin first, so you can set your controls and turn off the on-screen overlay and all that. Rogue Squadron is notoriously difficult for handhelds to emulate. It's more playable on here than I've seen in other handhelds, but it could be a little better. And it performs pretty much the same on both devices. The rest of the GameCube library is pretty decent on here. Let me just crash real quick. There you go. When I first booted up Dolphin, I went right into Smash Bros. Melee, and by default, right trigger ain't working. And this is very similar to a problem I had with the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, so I was a little peeved. It took me so long to figure this out. Retro controller mode, L2 and R2 mode analog, Retroid Pocket controller, L and R set to the L2 and R2 triggers, L analog, R analog set to the same buttons. And now we're gaming, baby. Look at that. Oh, I'm standing still. That's all I ever wanted. Oh my God. Oh my God, that fixes it on the Mini too. Oh my God. You know, this was really hard to look up. Am I the only one who had this problem? PS2 also runs amazing on both of these. I like testing Burnout Revenge because I can usually tell by the music whether or not it's emulating at the proper speed, and both consoles handled it exceptionally. On the 5, Aether SX2 will default to 4x3, so I just had to switch that over to 16x9 for this game, and it looks great. Hey, you like this desk mat? WolffDenapparel.com. I don't have any sponsors today, so please help, please. When playing 3DS, on widescreen systems like this, I like to have it set up so that both screens are side by side next to each other, and you can easily do that in Citra. Most games are going to have the top screen do all the work, so having that one really big is fine. And you can always change it depending on whatever game you're playing. Rarely do the screens need to be on top of each other. On the Mini, it's so small and square, you're kind of limited to just one screen. Nintendo Switch actually crashed on me a bunch. I downloaded the latest Mesa turnip driver, and that wasn't even working for me. Shout out to Orion Retro. I watched his video, and he had revision 9v2, and that version is working just fine for me. It's still a little slow. There's some glitches here and there, but it's performing way better than it should for a $220 device. The triggers also didn't work in Yuzu. I had to set them individually. Something's weird about them. Every other console runs great on both of these with minimal tinkering. I use RetroArch for most other systems.
Just some slight scaling issues I needed to change with integer scaling, and that looks a little better.
I like a 4x3 layout for most stuff, except for Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. I prefer the native aspect ratios, which are usually just core provided, and that's easy enough to set in the RetroArch settings. On the 5, there are some pretty great, simple widescreen hacks you can do. The first game I played on the 5 was actually Sonic 3 with the Genesis Plus GX Wide emulation core, which took me a second to figure out how to set an emulation station, but we got there. Without any other tweaks, it has some pretty obvious issues, but it's cool that it's even an option. Same with Super Mario World widescreen using the BeastNES Wide emulation core. This might give you a lot more reason to go for the widescreen Retroid Pocket 5. Other reasons to go for the 5 are regular Android games, which will always look better on a standard 16:9 display. And game streaming. Modern games, again, will almost always look better on a 16:9 display over a 4:3 display. The Mini is only $20 cheaper, and you're losing a lot of screen real estate. And for the last reason to get the 5 over the Mini's butt ugly. It looks like this on the website, and it looks like this in real life. What is it about this render that looks so much better than the real thing? Not to mention, when the Mini first shipped, the orange version just shipped as straight up the wrong color. Retroid made good on this, and they offered returns for anybody who was affected, but it's just another example of Retroid not even looking at the devices that they're sending out to people. Which brings me to my last point. I would love to be able to recommend the Retroid Pocket 5 to people. On paper, it makes the most sense. It's the best handheld you can get for the money. It's immensely powerful. The next console that even comes close to a Retroid's power is hundreds of dollars more. But it's hard to recommend their products given the constant issues at launch. And if you don't get a Retroid at launch, you might as well wait a month for them to release the Retroid Pocket 6, because they release them every 4 seconds. So, yeah, it is the best handheld because of the price point and the power that it provides, but only if everything goes well for you. All things considered, the issues I had are minor, and those issues are mostly on the Mini. But I'm just not confident enough in Retroid to say it's the one to go for. I'm not confident how happy most people would be with this purchase. The one that I have in my hand right here, if you're willing to put your own launcher on it, is great for the money. But will you be happy with it? I don't know. That means I don't know. So what do you guys think about the Retroid Pocket 5 and the Mini? Did anybody have any problems that I didn't end up having? Am I being a little over dramatic about some of these problems? Also, do they not give me a review unit because I don't say nice things? Is that it? Is that why I didn't get one? Am I too mean? Leave it in the comments below. Add me on Twitter and all this other social media garbage, and also Blue Sky, of course. Hey, there's no sponsor, so buy this shirt. I don't know why I decided to frame this in a way where you couldn't see it. That's wolfdenapparel.com. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, I'm gonna Twitch stream for the first time here on YouTube. That's not a Twitch stream. It's also not the first time. I used to do this years ago. It'll be on Sunday at around 8 p.m. I'm gonna start streaming here on YouTube a lot more, usually when it's something that's related to a video, like playing with a handheld. So you don't have to go to a whole nother platform. You can just see it right here on YouTube and talk to me in the chat, and we can hang out and whatever. And you can help me with these videos, because sometimes you guys give me a lot of ideas, or you tell me things that I don't know about the product that I'm futzing with. So I'll see you then. Thank you very much. Have yourselves a very good week. Make sure you're subscribed so you know.